Impact Interview is sponsored by the Pocono Mountains, where small town charm meets big adventures. Book your trip today by visiting PoconoMountains.com.
Welcome back to Nittany Game Week. It is Ohio State week, and our Impact Interview guest is one of the all-time Buckeye greats. We know what really matters in that world, so we'll start with the 9-1 record against the team up north, five-time national champion when you combine his work at Youngstown State and Ohio State. Hall of Fame coach Jim Tressel, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time.
And my honor to be here. This is a big week, and I couldn't be more excited to be with two of my colleagues, Tom Bradley and Jay Paterno, two of the best.
Well, I get to be with them every week. I agree with you there, Coach. And we call this the Impact Interview. And let's start with your impact off the field. You and your wife, Ellen, have been very philanthropic, donating money to benefit libraries, a cancer center, and facilities at both Ohio State and Youngstown State, where you actually served as the president for a few years. How important is it for coaches to engage universities in that way to set a standard for other alumni to follow?
Well, we think it's so important. And we were fortunate that we had great role models when it came to that. You know, Jay and Sue Paterno, or not Jay, Joe and Sue Paterno, amazing things that they did on that Penn State campus. And they kind of set the stage for other people to understand the importance of having an attitude of gratitude and paying forward and making a difference where you are. And Woody and Ann Hayes, extraordinary at Ohio State. My mom and dad, the same at Baldwin Wallace. We had great role models, and you know, it's so important. We would tell our players all the time, you know, you're fortunate with the blessings that you've had. It's your responsibility to make a difference and care for others, and sometimes it's in the form of philanthropy.
Jim, you know, in all the years we played you, every year the team that had the most rushing yards won the Penn State-Ohio State matchup. Lately, some of it's been about quarterback play. How do you see this one playing out Saturday?
You know, I still think that that's the key. The two measurables in my mind that will never go away, because the game of football is a physical game, is how many rushing yards are you going to get and what's the turnover margin going to be? You know, you can't give great teams the football. So the defenses that get takeaways, they're going to really make a difference for their team. But those rushing yards, and I think back to our games, and Tom Bradley, I remember his stacked blitz. I still have nightmares trying to run the football into his stacked blitz and trying to eke out a yard or two. And in fact, I remember one time on a 4th and 1, we tried a quarterback sneak and fumbled the doggone ball and ended up the Nittany's beat us because we couldn't get a yard. And so rushing the football, even though we have this new passing game and so forth, and you have to throw it. We want to throw it. But if you can win in the trenches and you can take care of the football, that's how you progress.
Coach, you know how tough it can be to play at Penn State in a big game like this, especially with that crowd. What are some of the keys for Ohio State to handle that noise and get settled in after the initial emotions, start to stabilize?
Now, the first thing is I'm glad it's not in the evening, because those whiteouts, especially for your young players, the older guys maybe that had been through a whiteout kind of enjoyed it and liked it and couldn't wait. The young guys, their eyeballs were popping out of their head. They couldn't think. They made missed assignments, whatever. So I'm glad it's at noon. But Penn State, Camp Randall, Wisconsin, two of the hardest places. You have to work on, silent snap count. You have to remind your folks that when the momentum is swinging the Nittany Lions way or the Badgers way, you're going to have to keep your poise, because it's loud. It's you can feel the electricity and the energy and so forth. And so it's one more tough situation, along with the great players Penn State always has. That home crowd is clearly one of their advantages, and you got to handle it.
It seems like no matter what Ryan Day does, many Ohio State fans just can find fault somewhere, and those expectations are so sky high when it comes to the Buckeyes. Having been in that seat, how would you assess how Ryan has done and how important this year has become for the program?
I'm a real Ryan Day fan. I mean, I think he's a great young man. He's done a great job putting a staff together and an outstanding roster together. He cares about the community. He's made a difference. His leadership on the mental health stage has been, well documented in Columbus and beyond. And so, I think he's a great one. The easy thing for us coaches is we're so busy working that we don't really feel how hot the seat is because, we're working. I mean, we don't have time to read social media or read the newspaper or listen to the podcasts. So I see Ryan about every other week. I get a chance to stop down for practice, and he's a determined guy. He's a fiery guy. It takes all different styles to coach this game. But I know this. He knows how good the Nittany Lions are. He knows that the margin for error right now with the playoff scene. I kind of chuckle at these Division I coaches now. We lived that world of, hey, you got to find a way to get in the playoffs in 1AA for years and years, and it's a different kind of situation. So I think he feels the urgency without question, but I think he does a nice job with his group, and he's got a talented group. And it's going to come down to that one or two plays that turn the tide. And we could all discuss the plays that turn the tide in one of our victories or turn the tide in one of our losses. And he's just got to make sure that his guys turn the tide at the moment with the big play.
So let's shift gears, talking about big contests and big competitions. Some have called the 2008 summer bocce matchup between Team Italia with Bo Pelini, Carm Cassis, Todd Blackledge, and Jay Paterno against Team Youngstown with Jim Tressel, Bob Stoops, Kirk Herbstreit, and Ron Stoops at the MVR in Youngstown. They've called that the greatest sporting event in leisure sports history. Does that loss still haunt you, or have you, moved on? Is that still one of the great losses of your career?
Might have been the game of the century. And you know what? Every loss still haunts you. And that's what's funny about coaching. You might have a lot of wins, or even bocce. You might have a lot of wins, but the big losses stick with you. But you learn a lot of lessons from the big losses. And the lesson I learned is you don't bring the Paisans in from State College and let them beat you on your home court.
Jim, your father Lee was a national championship coach at Baldwin Wallace in 1978. What were some of the first coaching lessons you learned from him?
Probably the biggest thing that I learned from him was how deeply he cared about his players that had nothing to do with football. Now, we lived right on campus. Our house was next door to the stadium. The players were there eating all the time. They were there getting advice all the time. They might have been there getting some scolding a bit of the time. We even had an attic in the top of the house where 2 or 3 players would live. That my guess is they hadn't been following the proper social measures. I'm not sure, but those guys all knew that he cared deeply about them, that my mom cared deeply about them, that it wasn't just about football. It was about getting them ready for the rest of their lives. And that's what really crafted how we went about coaching is, granted, you need to win. Also, you can't win enough. It's just impossible because your fans want you to win every game and every championship. And but we knew we had to win, but we knew what was most important was preparing our young people for the rest of their lives. And that's what I learned from him, and that's what we tried to do.
Coach, all of you guys have been out on that recruiting trail for many, many years, and football just seems to have a mystique and kind of a mythical hold on the Buckeye State. What is it about that sport that makes it so special in Ohio?
I think the big thing that happened is our part of Ohio, especially Northeast Ohio, even on into Northwest Ohio, was all really founded with the Industrial Revolution, the steel mills and the rubber plants and the glass factories, and people came from all over the world to live in those communities. Well, they weren't going home for the weekend. It wasn't something that they could go back to their homeland all the time. So the community became their home, their passion, and the high school football team in that community became the heartbeat. And it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and everyone loved the game of football. And if you look at the the number of coaches that have gone out from that part of the world to go on and do great things in high schools, colleges, and the NFL. I think it's because it was such a part of the fabric of the community. And like anything else, if it's important to you, you'll try to do it well.
Jim, one last one for you. You alluded to the 1AA playoffs, and I had coached at JMU and been in those playoffs, so have a sense. And the success that you had certainly in those playoffs is really unsurpassed. But as you look at the 12-team playoff coming, and some say a 16-team playoff will be coming, what kind of demands were there physically on your team, and what should fans expect in terms of what's coming?
I think the first thing is the mental demand. And we used to always talk about the fact that September is for pretenders and November is for contenders, and that you had to understand that mentally going in, that your trajectory going into the month of November had to be the right trajectory. Then the physical part of things, I think you as a coaching staff needed to know that in our case in 1AA, our goal was to play 15 games. I mean, that's what we wanted to do. Back then, there were 11 regular season. And if you went all 4 rounds in the playoffs, you played 15. And so we wanted to make sure we trained ourselves back in January through July to prepare ourselves for 15 games. And then we had to coach appropriately so that we didn't leave some of it on the field and overdo it in the season. Whoever was healthy when the playoffs started had a great chance, because you were going to play 4 straight games of top 10 teams. And so those were going to be battles, and you were going to need to be at your best. And so we pulled back a little bit from a time line in practice once November hit, with the idea that, we still had 2 months of football to play, and that we needed to be healthy, and that, we had done a lot of the work we needed to do. Now it was, we needed to refine and keep getting better. And so I think there is a little, everyone says all this bit about data and science and all that kind of thing in football, technology and whatnot. The art of coaching is what wins championships. It's knowing when you've had enough, when it's too much. Are we hitting too much, or how are our legs? All of those different things. And that's what was fun. When the calendar switched to November, that's when we were at our best.
Coach, I have one more for you about that transition from 1AA or from that level to Division I. We're seeing that happen, and the Buckeyes have another opponent after Penn State, Indiana, with Coach Cignetti and what he's done in such a quick time at Indiana with the Hoosiers. To go 8-0 and to do what he's done, I mean, I think better than anyone that transition can be done, and football is football, right? All the coaching situations, they translate no matter what level. Have you followed what they've been doing, and how impressed are you with what Coach Cignetti is doing, and how is he doing, I guess, is the question.
Well, there's great coaches at every level. Some of the best coaches in the world are coaching in high school and Division III football and all the rest. And I've talked to a lot of my coaching tree or whatever, my old guys that are out there, head coaches or coordinators or whatever. And I've been telling them for the last year or two that, we always believed that team building and culture was so critical. I think in today's world, it's even more critical, because rosters change very rapidly. People are coming and going. You're not able to say, well, this guy will get it in 3 or 4 years and then he'll become a great player for 2 years. You need to create culture quickly. And I think that's what Coach Cignetti has done at Indiana. He brought a dozen guys with him from JMU. They knew his culture. I think the other players turned to them and said, hey, what are his expectations? What's good about him? Why were you guys so good? And I think they bought in and created a team culture faster than maybe most people do. And they've obviously got some great talent, and heck, they went and won last week with a backup quarterback, and I think they're for real. I think they have a lot of confidence. And I think it's because they've done a good job of building that team and that culture. It hasn't taken as long as most of the folks that try to do it.